key stopped working outside my own grandfather's house, 4 days after we buried him. I didn't know yet that the door was the least of what they'd locked me out of. I stood there jiggling a key I'd used 1,000 times in front of a door I'd walked through since I was 6 years old, and for the first time in my life, and it didn't open. The lock had been changed. The door opened from the inside instead. My mother stood there, not surprised to see me, not sad, just kinda composed, the way you look at someone who's shown up late to a meeting that already ended without them. "We need to talk about the will," she said. "No, hello? No, I'm sorry about Dad." 4 days after the funeral, and that was the first sentence out of her mouth. I stood on that porch for a second, waiting for something else. Some acknowledgement that a man had just died, that I'd just lost the only person who ever noticed me, but nothing came. I understood right then. This was never going to be about grief. 4 days earlier, at the funeral itself, I remember standing near the casket while relatives I barely recognized shook my father's hand, patted my brother Daniel on the back, told them both how sorry they were. Nobody came to me first. I stood off to the side in my one good suit, watching people file past the family my grandfather actually loved, without knowing which one of us had actually been that to him. An old friend of Grandpa's and a man I didn't recognize stopped in front of me and squeezed my shoulder. "You're the grandson who used to fix things with him, aren't you? He talked about you more than anybody." It was the only sentence all day that made me want to cry. I asked him what Grandpa used to say. He smiled, a little sad. Mostly that you were the only one who ever asked him real questions back. Said most people in his life just talked at him. I didn't know what to do with that, standing there in a suit that didn't quite fit. So I just thanked him and let him move along. I remember thinking, even then, that it made more sense than anything my own parents had said to me all day. At the reception afterward, my mother arranged the seating without asking anyone. Daniel sat beside her. I ended up at the far end of a folding table near the kitchen, next to an elderly cousin I'd met maybe twice. Even here, even today, the seating chart was the same as it had always been. That's the house I grew up in. Daniel, 2 years older, wasn't just the older brother. He was the point of the family. I remember one specific dinner. I was maybe 11. Daniel brought home a report card with 2 B's on it, and my mother made a whole production out of it. That same week, I'd placed second in a citywide spelling bee. I mentioned it at that same table, I quietly, almost apologizing for bringing it up. My father didn't even look up from his plate. "That's nice, buddy," he said, already turning back to ask Daniel about football tryouts. That was the pattern, not cruelty. That would have at least been something. Just absence. Like I was furniture that occasionally spoke. My birthdays came and went most years without a cake. Not because we couldn't afford one. Daniel's birthday always had one. Always had friends over. Mine just slipped past. One year I reminded my mother it was coming up. She said, "Oh, right, we'll do something," and then never did. I sat in my room that night with a candle I'd bought myself, stuck into a cupcake from the gas station, and didn't tell anyone. I stopped reminding her after that. The only person who ever noticed any of it was my grandfather. He'd come over on Sundays, and while everyone else orbited around Daniel's latest achievement, he'd pull a chair up next to mine at the far end of the table and just ask me things. Real things. "What are you reading right now? You still like taking things apart to see how they work?" Small questions, but he waited for the answers, like they actually mattered to him. There was a Sunday I still think about. I was maybe 13. I'd taken apart an old lawnmower engine in his garage, pieces spread across a towel on the concrete floor. No real plan for putting it back together. He came out with 2 sodas and sat down on an overturned bucket next to me, and instead of telling me to clean it up, he just asked what each piece did. We sat out there for 2 hours. He didn't fix a single thing for me. He just sat there while I figured it out. handing me tools when I asked. When we finally got the engine running again, he just nodded like it was expected, like he'd known the whole time I could do it. That nod meant more to me than every trophy Daniel ever brought home. Nobody else at that house had ever given me 2 hours of anything. Once, when I was 15, I overheard my mother telling him he was too soft on me, that he was going to make me entitled. Grandpa just laughed and said, "Entitled to what? Someone remembering he exists?" Nobody laughed back. So when he died, I didn't just lose a grandfather. I lost the only person who'd ever made me feel like I was actually in the room. The call came 11 days after the funeral. An unknown number, late on a Tuesday evening. I almost let it go to voicemail. I answered anyway. The voice on the other end was calm, deliberate, a lawyer's voice. The kind that said hard sentences so many times they've stopped sounding hard. "I'm calling regarding the estate of your grandfather. I need to confirm. You're his biological grandson through his son. Is that correct?" I actually laughed. "You want my brother, Daniel? He's the one who—" "The will is very specific," he cut in, gently. "There's only one named heir. It's you." I sat down without deciding to. He kept talking. Legal verification, old records, a DNA confirmation done years ago that I'd never known about, and none of it landed until he said the sentence that actually mattered. "Your father was adopted. He was never your grandfather's biological son, which means, through direct bloodline, you're the only heir he has left." My coffee went cold on the counter. I didn't move for what felt like a long time. I sat there running the math backward. Every family photo, every holiday, every time my father had been introduced as Walter's son, without a single asterisk attached. None of them had known. Or maybe Grandpa was the only one who had, and he'd carried that quietly for decades. I thought about that garage, those 2 hours with the lawnmower engine. Had he already known, even then, that I was the only blood he had left in that house? Had that nod meant something bigger than I understood at 13? Every ignored birthday, every dinner where I disappeared into the background, every "that's nice, buddy," and now, legally, in a way none of them could argue with, I was the only one who'd ever actually mattered to him. Within 3 days, my phone hadn't stopped ringing. My mother first. "There's clearly been some kind of mistake. We should handle this as a family. Family, like we'd ever been one when it counted." Then Daniel. No preamble. Just a text, "We should split this evenly. That's only fair." Fair. From the boy who got a birthday party every single year of his life. While mine came and went in silence, my father didn't call at all, which, honestly, felt more honest than anything my mother or brother said that whole week. I didn't reply to any of them for 4 days. I spent that time going through boxes of my grandfather's things instead. Old photographs and tools, a shoebox of birthday cards he'd apparently kept from me since I was 7 years old. Cards nobody else in that house had ever saved. The meeting was set at the lawyer's office 2 weeks later. I walked in and found all 3 of them already seated, trying to look like people who hadn't spent 30 years treating me like an afterthought. My mother spoke first. "We just think, given everything, it makes sense to split this as a family." "You mean the same family that forgot my birthday 4 years running? That family?" Nobody said anything. "Grandpa didn't write this will by accident," I said. "He wrote it because he was the only one paying attention. He probably knew about all of this and the adoption, everything, long before any lawyer had to explain it to me." Daniel started to argue that none of this was his fault, that he shouldn't be punished for something he didn't even know about. "You're right," I said. "It's not your fault you didn't know, but it is your fault you never once asked how my birthday went. Nobody needed a DNA test to do that." He didn't have an answer for that. My father, who hadn't said a word the entire meeting, finally spoke. "He never told me. All these years, and he never once told me." "Maybe he was waiting to see if it would matter," I said. "If you'd have treated me differently either way." I stood up before anyone could say anything else. You didn't lose an inheritance today, I said. You lost the version of me who used to wait for you to notice him. That version's gone. I walked out of that office and didn't look back once. My grandfather spent his whole life quietly seeing what nobody else bothered to see. And in the end, he made sure that the one person he actually knew was the one who inherited everything. Not because I asked for it, because I earned it, just by being the only one who ever really showed up. It's been 4 months since that meeting. I still have that shoebox of birthday cards on my desk. Every single one dated going back 17 years. Some he never even mailed. He just kept them, like he was building an archive of a relationship nobody else in that family thought was worth documenting. I drove past the old house last week. There's a for sale sign in the yard now. I didn't feel angry looking at it. I just thought about that garage, about 2 sodas and an old engine, about a version of a childhood that actually had someone paying attention in it. Sometimes I think about that afternoon, the sodas going warm in the sun, the smell of old gasoline, his hands guiding mine without ever quite taking over. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment everything got decided. Not the will, not the lawyer's call. That garage. Everything after him was just paperwork. Catching up to something he'd already known for years.